The evening light filtered through the tall windows of the Riverside Concert Hall, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. Lisa moved her mop in steady circles, the same way she had done for the past 3 years. The water in her bucket had turned gray from cleaning the stage, and her back ached from bending over for hours. But she didn't mind. Not really. What she did mind was the silence. The orchestra had left 30 minutes ago, and now the hall felt empty in a way that made her chest tight. During rehearsals, the space came alive with music that seemed to paint colors in the air. But once everyone left, it was just her and the mop and that beautiful black piano sitting center stage like a sleeping giant. Lisa was 42 years old, though some days she felt much older. Her hands were rough from years of cleaning work. Her shoulders permanently hunched from carrying supplies up and down the building's 3 flights of stairs. She had a daughter in high school, Sophie, who was smart enough to get into any college she wanted. That's what kept Lisa going. That's what made the early mornings and late nights worth it. She squeezed the mop and started on the aisles between the seats, row by row, methodically, not thinking about anything in particular. That's how she preferred it. Thinking led to remembering, and remembering led to that hollow feeling in her stomach that never quite went away. "Excuse me, Lisa." She looked up to see Mr. Patterson, the hall's director, hurrying toward her. He was a tall man with silver hair and glasses that always seemed to be sliding down his nose. In the 3 years she'd worked here, he'd spoken to her maybe a dozen times. Always polite, always respectful, but never more than a quick greeting or a thank you. "Yes, sir." Lisa straightened up, wondering if she'd missed a spot somewhere or forgotten to lock one of the storage rooms. Mr. Patterson looked stressed. His tie was loosened, and there were worry lines creased deep into his forehead. "I have a rather unusual question for you, and please feel free to say no if this makes you uncomfortable." Lisa waited, gripping the mop handle a little tighter. "One of the staff members mentioned that you sometimes, that you seem interested in the piano, that you stand near it during your breaks sometimes." He paused, studying her face. "Do you play?" The question hit her like a wave of cold water. Her throat went dry. "A long time ago, I used to." "How long ago?" "More than 15 years?" Mr. Patterson nodded, as if making a difficult calculation in his head. "Here's the situation. Our pianist for tomorrow night's benefit concert just called. She's in the emergency room with severe food poisoning. The concert starts at 7, and we have over 800 people who've already bought tickets. The youth orchestra can perform most of the program on their own, but we need someone to play the opening piece. Just one song. Something simple." Lisa's heart started beating faster. "Sir, I don't think I know it's last minute. I know it's asking a lot. But I'm desperate here, Lisa. We've called every pianist in the area. They're all booked or unavailable." He pushed his glasses up. "The piece is very straightforward. Nothing complicated. You just need to play for about 4 minutes to open the show. That's all." She looked past him at the piano. Even from this distance, she could see the ivory keys gleaming under the stage lights. Her fingers tingled, a phantom sensation of muscle memory trying to wake up after years of sleep. "I haven't practiced in over a decade," she said quietly. "I sold my piano a long time ago, I understand, and I wouldn't ask if we had any other option. But if you think you could manage something simple, anything at all, it would save the entire event. This concert raises money for the youth music program. A lot of kids depend on it." Lisa set down her mop. Her hands were trembling slightly. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, but I need to know by morning. The concert is tomorrow evening." Mr. Patterson gave her a small, hopeful smile. "For what it's worth, I've seen you looking at that piano. The way you look at it, that's not how someone looks at furniture. That's how a musician looks at an instrument." After he left, Lisa stood in the empty hall for a long time. She should finish her cleaning. She should go home. She should call Mr. Patterson first thing in the morning and tell him no. Tell him to find someone else. Tell him that whatever he saw on her face when she looked at the piano was just nostalgia. Nothing more. Instead, she walked toward the stage. The piano was a Steinway, worth more than she'd earned in 5 years. She'd cleaned around it 1,000 times, but had never touched the keys. Never let herself. She climbed the steps to the stage, her wet shoes squeaking slightly on the wood. Up close, it was even more magnificent. The black lacquer reflected her image back at her, distorted and small. She reached out slowly and lifted the key cover. The action was smooth, well maintained. The keys were pristine white and black, arranged in the familiar pattern that had once been as natural to her as breathing. Lisa glanced around. The hall was empty. The building was empty. No one would know. She sat on the bench and adjusted it forward, her body remembering the proper distance automatically. Her fingers hovered over the keys, shaking now. Not from fear. From something else? Something that had been locked away for so long she'd almost forgotten it existed. She pressed down on middle C. The note rang out clear and pure, filling the empty hall with sound. Then D, then E. A simple scale. The first thing any student learns. Her eyes filled with tears. She'd been 12. When her grandmother first taught her to play, back in their tiny apartment where the upright piano took up half the living room. She'd been 18 when she won the regional competition. 19 when she got accepted to the music conservatory on a full scholarship, and 21 when she gave it all up. Sophie had been a baby then. Sophie's father had left. There was no money, no family support, no way to study music and raise a child alone. So Lisa had made a choice. She'd sold the piano. She'd taken the cleaning job. She'd put away that part of herself, like an old coat that no longer fit. She pulled her hands back from the keys and closed the cover carefully. The note she'd played still hung in the air, fading slowly into silence. That night, Lisa barely slept. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment, thinking about Mr. Patterson's request. Just one simple song. For minutes. She could do that, couldn't she? Just play something easy. Something that wouldn't embarrass her or disappoint anyone. But even as she tried to convince herself, another voice whispered in the back of her mind. A voice that remembered what it felt like to lose yourself in music, to let your hands speak what your heart couldn't say in words. A voice that asked a dangerous question. What if this was her only chance? What if tomorrow night was the last time she'd ever sit at a piano like that? In the darkness of her bedroom, Lisa's fingers moved against the blanket. Practicing scales she hadn't played in 15 years, remembering a life she thought she'd left behind forever. Lisa woke up at 3 a.m, her heart racing. She'd been dreaming about the piano, about her hands moving across keys that kept shifting and changing beneath her fingers. In the dream, she was on stage in front of hundreds of people. But when she looked down, the sheet music was blank. She got out of bed and walked to the kitchen, her bare feet cold against the linoleum floor. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator. Through the thin walls, she could hear Mr. Chen from next door snoring. Everything was exactly as it always was. Ordinary, safe, predictable. So why did her hands keep shaking? She filled a glass with water and sat at the small kitchen table. The same table where she paid bills every month, where Sophie did homework, where they ate dinner together when Lisa wasn't working late. On the wall hung a calendar with Sophie's basketball games circled in red marker. Next month was marked with college application deadlines. This was her life now. A good life. A simple life. Why was she even considering this crazy idea, Mom? Lisa turned to see Sophie standing in the doorway wearing an oversized t-shirt and pajama pants. Her daughter's hair was messy from sleep, and she squinted against the kitchen light. Did I wake you? I'm sorry, honey. No, I just got up for water. Sophie came into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, studying her mother's face. You okay? You look weird. I look weird? Lisa managed a small smile. Yeah, like stressed weird. Not regular, tired weird. Sophie grabbed a glass from the cabinet. What's going on? Lisa hesitated. She and Sophie talked about everything, usually. School, friends, Sophie's dreams of becoming a veterinarian. But there were parts of Lisa's past that she'd kept tucked away, thinking it was easier that way. Less painful. Mr. Patterson asked me to do something tomorrow night, Lisa said slowly. At the concert hall, like what? Extra cleaning? No. He asked me to play the piano. Just one song. Their regular pianist got sick. Sophie froze with the water glass halfway to her mouth. Wait, what? You play piano? The surprise in her daughter's voice shouldn't have hurt, but it did. Of course, Sophie didn't know. Lisa had never told her, had never wanted to explain what she'd given up, what she'd lost. I used to, Lisa said quietly. A long time ago, before you were born. Sophie set down her glass and pulled out a chair, sitting across from her mother. Like, how good were you? Good enough to get into the music conservatory. I had a scholarship and everything. Mom. Sophie's eyes went wide. What happened? Why didn't you go? Lisa looked down at her hands, at the calluses from cleaning, at the ring she still wore even though Sophie's father had left 16 years ago. You happened, sweetheart? And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that I had to make a choice and I chose you. I chose to make sure you had what you needed. The scholarship wouldn't have covered childcare or rent or anything else, so I took the cleaning job instead. The kitchen fell silent. Sophie reached across the table and took her mother's hand. So are you going to do it? Play tomorrow. I don't know. It's been so long, Sophie. 15 years. My hands aren't the same. I haven't practiced. What if I mess up in front of all those people? Sophie squeezed her hand tighter. Mom, you work 6 days a week cleaning other people's buildings. You make my lunch every single morning. You've never missed one of my basketball games, even when you're exhausted. You're literally the bravest person I know. She paused. What do you have to lose? Lisa laughed, but it came out shaky. My dignity. Please. You clean toilets for a living. No offense, but I think your dignity can handle one piano song. Sophie grinned. Besides, I want to see this. I want to see the part of you that I never knew existed. After Sophie went back to bed, Lisa sat alone in the kitchen for another hour. She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who practiced 8 hours a day and dreamed of playing in concert halls around the world. She thought about the young mother she'd become, scared and alone but determined to give her baby a good life. And she thought about the woman she was now, somewhere between those two versions of herself. Finally, as the sky started to lighten outside her window, she made a decision at 7 in the morning. She called Mr. Patterson. I'll do it, she said before she could change her mind. I'll play tomorrow night. The relief in his voice was immediate. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much. Come by the hall this afternoon around 2. We'll do a quick run-through, and I'll give you the sheet music. Remember, keep it simple. Nothing fancy, just a gentle piece to open the show. Lisa arrived at the concert hall at exactly 2 o'clock. She'd taken the afternoon off from her other cleaning job, something she never did. The money she'd lose today would mean skipping groceries this week. But somehow that didn't seem to matter anymore. Mr. Patterson met her at the stage entrance. He handed her a folder with sheet music inside. This is the piece. It's called Morning Prayer by a local composer. Very straightforward melody, simple chord progressions. You'll do great. Lisa opened the folder and looked at the music. He was right. It was easy, almost insultingly easy. The kind of piece a first-year student could manage. Her fingers could play this in her sleep. But as she sat at the piano and placed the sheet music on the stand, something felt wrong. She started to play the simple melody, and the notes came out correctly, technically perfect, but lifeless. Like reading words from a menu instead of poetry. She stopped halfway through and sat with her hands in her lap. Everything okay? Mr. Patterson called from the seats. Yes, sorry, just getting familiar with it. But that was a lie. She was familiar with it already. That was the problem. This piece didn't challenge her. It didn't ask anything of her except to show up and press the right keys in the right order. Lisa's eyes drifted to her bag on the floor beside the piano bench. Inside was another piece of sheet music. One she'd printed out this morning after calling Mr. Patterson. One she'd spent hours searching for online. Finally finding it in a digital archive. It was the piece she'd been preparing 15 years ago. The piece she was supposed to perform for her conservatory audition, the one she never got to play. She'd memorized it back then, every note, every dynamic marking, every subtle shift in tempo. She wondered if her hands still remembered, The smart thing would be to stick with the easy piece. Play it safe. Don't risk embarrassing herself or disappointing Mr. Patterson or ruining the concert for 800 people. But as Lisa sat at that piano in the empty concert hall, she realized something. She'd been playing it safe for 15 years. She'd chosen security over dreams, practicality over passion. And those had been good choices, necessary choices. She didn't regret them. But tomorrow night, for 4 minutes, she didn't want to be the cleaning lady, playing a simple song. She wanted to be a pianist again. Lisa pulled the other sheet, music from her bag, and placed it on the stand. Her hands were shaking as she positioned them over the keys. This piece was different. This piece was full of storms and fire and heartbreak. This piece would show everyone exactly who she used to be, and maybe who she still was underneath everything else. She took a deep breath and began to play. The day of the concert arrived faster than Lisa expected. She'd barely slept again, this time running through the music in her mind over and over. Her fingers had tapped against her bed sheets in the dark, practicing passages she hadn't touched in 15 years. Now, standing in the small dressing room backstage, she stared at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Mr. Patterson had arranged for her to borrow a dress from the hall's costume collection. It was black and simple, a bit loose around the shoulders, but elegant enough. Lisa had never worn anything like it. Her usual uniform was cleaning scrubs and worn sneakers. She touched the fabric carefully, afraid she might somehow damage it. Her hands were clean, but rough. No amount of lotion could hide years of scrubbing floors and handling harsh chemicals. She'd tried to do something nice with her hair, pulling it back into a neat bun, but pieces kept falling out. She looked tired. She looked scared. She looked like someone who had no business being here. There was a soft knock on the door. "Mom," Sophie peeked her head in, and her face lit up. "Wow, you look beautiful." Lisa's eyes stung with unexpected tears. "I look ridiculous." "No, you don't. You look like a pianist." Sophie came in and closed the door behind her. She was wearing her nicest dress, the one she saved for school presentations. "I brought you something." She held out a small object. It was a hair clip, simple and silver, shaped like a music note. Lisa recognized it immediately. "That was your grandmother's," she whispered. "Die. You keep it in your jewelry box. I thought maybe it would bring you luck." Sophie helped pin it into her mother's hair, securing the loose pieces. "They're perfect." Stagehand knocked on the door. 5 minutes, Ms. Chen." 5 minutes. Lisa's stomach dropped. The concert hall was full. She'd heard people arriving for the past hour, their voices and footsteps echoing through the building. 800 people. "Maybe more, Mom." Sophie took both of her hands. "Listen to me. Whatever happens out there, I'm proud of you. Okay? Whether you play every note perfectly or mess up completely, I'm proud that you're doing this." Lisa pulled her daughter into a tight hug. "I love you so much." "I love you too. Now go show them what you've got." The walk from the dressing room to the stage wings felt like miles. Lisa's borrowed shoes pinched her feet. The dress felt strange, too formal, like she was wearing a costume. She could hear the audience settling into their seats, programs rustling, conversations humming in the wings. She found the youth orchestra members warming up. They were teenagers, most of them between 14 and 17, holding violins and cellos and flutes. They glanced at her curiously. Some of them recognized her as the cleaning lady. She could see it in their faces, the confusion about why she was here, dressed like a performer. Mr. Patterson appeared at her elbow. "Ready?" "No," Lisa thought. "Not even close." "Yes," she said out loud. "Remember, nice and simple. Just get through the piece and you're done." For minutes, he smiled encouragingly. "You're going to do great." Lisa nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Mr. Patterson didn't know she'd brought different sheet music. Didn't know she was planning to play something else entirely. Something that could either be spectacular or a complete disaster. She should tell him. She should explain. But her throat was too tight, and besides, what would she say? That she'd decided to ignore his instructions and play one of the most difficult pieces in the piano repertoire, instead of the gentle song he'd chosen? That she was risking the entire opening of the concert on muscle memory from 15 years ago? The house lights began to dim. The audience quieted. Lisa's heart hammered so hard she thought, everyone must be able to hear it. Mr. Patterson walked onto the stage to scattered applause. He spoke into the microphone about the youth music program, about the importance of arts education, about tonight's performance. His words blurred together in Lisa's ears. She focused on breathing. In and out. In and out. And now, Mr. Patterson said, his voice filling the hall to open tonight's concert, please welcome our special guest pianist, Lisa Chen. This was it. The moment where she could still back out. She could walk onto that stage, sit at the piano, and play the easy song. No one would know the difference. No one would be disappointed, but she would know. Lisa walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, much brighter than she'd expected. She couldn't see the audience, just a wall of darkness beyond the stage. Somewhere in that darkness was Sophie. Somewhere were her coworkers from the cleaning crew who'd come to watch. Somewhere were 800 strangers who had no idea who she was or what she'd given up to be standing here. The applause was polite, the kind you give someone you don't know. Lisa heard whispers, curious murmurs. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why hadn't anyone heard of her before? She reached the piano and sat down. The bench was the same one she'd adjusted during her practice session. The piano was the same magnificent Steinway. But everything felt different now, exposed under the lights with all those invisible eyes watching. Lisa adjusted the bench. It's like she'd done 1,000 times when she was younger. Her hands trembled as she placed them on her lap. The sheet music for the easy song was right there, ready to use instead. She reached into the small pocket of her dress and pulled out the folded pages of the other piece. The difficult one. The one that could break her heart all over again. Her fingers smoothed the creased paper as she set it on the music stand, in the front row of the orchestra section. A young violinist leaned toward her friend and whispered, "That's not the right music." The other girl squinted at the stand. "What is it?" "I don't know, but it's definitely not what we were told she'd play." Lisa took a breath. Her hands moved to the keys and found their starting position. She could feel the coolness of the ivory, the perfect weight of the action. This piano was a dream to play. If she was going to do this, at least she had the best instrument possible. For a moment, she froze. Doubt crashed over her like a wave. What was she thinking? She couldn't do this. It had been too long. Her hands were older, stiffer, damaged by years of hard work. She would fail spectacularly in front of all these people. She would humiliate herself and disappoint Mr. Patterson and ruin Sophie's image of her. She should stop. She should play the easy song. But then she thought about her grandmother, who taught her that music wasn't just about pressing the right keys. It was about telling the truth. And the truth was that Lisa had spent 15 years being practical and responsible and safe. Just once. For 4 minutes, she wanted to be brave. Her fingers pressed down on the opening chord. The sound that came out was rich and deep. Nothing like the gentle melody Mr. Patterson had chosen. This was different. This was powerful. The audience went completely silent. Lisa closed her eyes and let the music take over. Her hands remembered what her mind had almost forgotten. They moved across the keys with increasing confidence, finding the patterns, the rhythms, the emotion buried in every note. She was no longer the cleaning lady. She was no longer the struggling single mother. She was a pianist, and this was her moment. The music poured out of Lisa like water from a broken dam. Her fingers flew across the keys, finding notes she didn't consciously remember, but her body had never forgotten. The piece was technically brutal, full of rapid runs and complicated chord progressions that would make even experienced pianists nervous. But Lisa wasn't thinking about technique anymore. She was thinking about everything she'd felt 15 years ago when she'd first learned this piece. The hope, the dreams, the absolute certainty that music was what she was meant to do with her life. And then she was thinking about the hospital room, where she'd held newborn Sophie for the first time. Knowing in that moment that everything was about to change, the scholarship letter she'd folded up and put away. The piano she'd sold to a stranger for $300. The part of herself she'd carefully boxed up and hidden away because it hurt too much to look at. All of it came out through her fingers now. The piece moved from contemplative beauty into something darker, more turbulent. Lisa's whole body swayed with the music. Her foot worked the pedals, creating depth and resonance. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the air conditioning. Her hands ached, unused to this kind of sustained effort. But she pushed through. In the audience, Sophie sat frozen in her seat, her program crumpled in her lap. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. She couldn't. She was watching her mother transform into someone she'd never known existed. All those years of watching her mom come home exhausted, watching her count pennies at the kitchen table, watching her sacrifice everything for Sophie's future, and never once had Sophie seen this side of her. This fierce, powerful, magnificent side. Next to Sophie sat Mrs. Rodriguez, who worked the morning shift cleaning the concert hall. She'd known Lisa for 2 years, shared lunch breaks with her in the basement break room, had complained about aching knees and difficult stains. She'd seen Lisa as quiet, hardworking, unremarkable. Now her mouth hung open in shock. "I had no idea," she whispered to no one in particular, several rows back. Mr. Patterson stood against the wall, having given up his seat to a latecomer. His initial panic when he'd realized Lisa wasn't playing the assigned piece had given way to something else entirely. Awe. He'd been running this concert hall for 20 years. He'd heard some of the best pianists in the region perform on that stage. Lisa was holding her own against any of them, the piece built to its first climax. A cascade of notes that seemed to fall like rain. Lisa's fingers moved so fast, they blurred. This was the section she'd struggled with at 19, the part she'd practiced until her hands cramped. Now, somehow her older hands found their way through it. Not perfectly, there were small stumbles. Moments where the timing wasn't quite precise, but with such raw emotion that the imperfections didn't matter in the wings. The young violinist who'd noticed the wrong sheet music grabbed her conductor's arm. "Mr. Williams, what is she playing?" The conductor, a man in his 60s who'd taught music for 40 years, didn't take his eyes off the stage. "That's Chopin. Ballade number 1. He shook his head in disbelief. "One of the most difficult pieces ever written for piano." "But she's just the cleaning lady," another student whispered. "No," Mr. Williams said quietly. "She's a pianist. We just didn't know it." The music shifted again, becoming gentler, but no less intense. This was the section Lisa had always loved most, where the melody sang out above delicate accompaniment. Her hands knew exactly how to voice the chords, so the top notes sparkled like stars. She'd forgotten what this felt like. The complete absorption in sound, the way time seemed to stop existing. The sensation that she wasn't just playing the piano, but having a conversation with it. Telling it secrets she couldn't put into words. For 15 years, she'd denied herself this. She'd told herself it was okay, that she'd made the right choice, that being a mother was enough, and it had been enough. Sophie was the best thing that ever happened to her, and she'd never regret choosing her daughter's well-being over her own dreams, but God, she'd missed this. The piece moved into its most challenging section, the part that had given 19-year-old Lisa nightmares. Her fingers stumbled slightly over a particularly difficult passage. For a split second, she felt panic rise in her chest, but she pushed through, recovering quickly. Letting the momentum of the music carry her forward, no one in the audience noticed the small mistake. They were too caught up in the overall power of the performance. In the back of the hall, a man in his 70s sat with his wife, both of them retired music teachers. They'd come tonight to support the youth program, expecting a pleasant but unremarkable community concert. "Who is she?" the wife whispered, leaning close to her husband's ear. "I don't know, but listen to her phrasing. She understands this music." "Really understands it?" Her husband nodded. "She's had professional training. Has to have. You can't play like that without years of serious study." They had no idea they were watching someone who'd given up that professional training halfway through. who'd walked away from everything they'd worked for, who was, at this very moment, claiming a part of herself she'd thought was lost forever. The music built toward its final climax, the section where everything came together in a storm of sound. Lisa's hands flew across the keyboard, her arms crossing and uncrossing as she navigated the complex passages. Her back ached. Her fingers burned. The muscles in her forearms screamed in protest. She didn't care. This was everything she'd kept buried. Every late night working double shifts. Every time she'd walked past a music store and forced herself not to look in the windows. Every moment she'd heard music playing somewhere and felt that hollow ache in her chest. All of it came pouring out now in waves of sound that filled every corner of the concert hall. Sophie was openly crying now, not bothering to hide it. Around her, she could see others with wet eyes. An elderly woman dabbing at her face with a handkerchief. A young couple holding hands tightly. Even some of the teenage orchestra members in the wings had tears streaming down their cheeks. The final section approached, where the chaos resolved into something beautiful and peaceful. Lisa's hands slowed, playing the gentle conclusion with such tenderness it felt like a lullaby. After all the fire and passion, this ending was like coming home. Like finding peace after a long journey. She played the final chord and let it ring out, her foot holding the sustain pedal down so the notes filled the space with golden sound. Slowly, slowly, the vibrations faded until there was complete silence. Lisa sat perfectly still, her hands resting on the keys, her eyes still closed. She was breathing hard, exhausted, in a way she hadn't felt in years. Her whole body trembled. For one long moment, the entire concert hall was absolutely silent. 800 people sat frozen, not moving, barely breathing. Then someone started clapping, and then someone else. And then the entire hall erupted. People jumped to their feet. The sound of applause crashing over Lisa like a physical force. It went on, growing louder instead of softer. People were shouting, crying. The orchestra members in the wings were applauding frantically, their faces stunned. Lisa opened her eyes. The bright stage lights made everything beyond the piano invisible, but she could hear them, all of them. And for the first time in 15 years, she let herself feel it. Not the guilt of what she'd given up. Not the sadness of what could have been. Just the pure, uncomplicated joy of having played her heart out and having people respond to it. She stood up from the piano, bent on shaky legs, and took a small bow. The applause somehow got even louder. The standing ovation lasted almost 5 minutes. Lisa stood on the stage, overwhelmed, as wave after wave of applause washed over her. People weren't just clapping politely anymore. They were cheering, whistling. Some were still crying. She couldn't quite process what was happening. Her legs felt weak, and her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to play a simple 4-minute piece, get polite applause, and quietly exit the stage. Instead, she just poured her entire soul out in front of 800 strangers. Mr. Patterson rushed onto the stage, his face a mixture of shock and joy. He embraced her, and Lisa heard him say close to her ear, "That was absolutely incredible. I don't even know what to say." When he finally released her, Lisa managed to walk off stage on trembling legs. The moment she reached the wings, Sophie was there, throwing her arms around her mother and sobbing into her shoulder. "Mom, that was amazing. That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen." Lisa held her daughter tight, tears finally spilling down her own cheeks. "I was so scared." "I know. I could tell, but you did it anyway." Sophie pulled back, her face wet and beaming. "You were incredible." The youth orchestra members crowded around, their young faces full of wonder. The violinist who'd recognized the music touched Lisa's arm gently. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard live." "How long have you been playing?" "A long time," Lisa said, her voice hoarse. "And then not at all for 15 years. 15 years. The girl's eyes went wide. "You haven't played in 15 years and you just did that?" One of the cellists shook his head. "My teacher makes us practice 4 hours a day, and we're nowhere near that level." Mr. Williams, the conductor, approached with tears still visible on his face. "Miss Chen, I've been in music education for 4 decades. What you just did up there, that wasn't just technical skill. That was artistry. Real, genuine artistry. Paused. Why aren't you performing professionally? Lisa looked at Sophie, then back at the conductor. Life took me in a different direction. I had other priorities. Well, he said quietly. I hope you find your way back to this. The world needs to hear you play. The rest of the concert passed in a blur. Lisa changed back into her regular clothes, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. She sat in the back of the hall and watched the youth orchestra perform. But her mind kept replaying those 4 minutes on stage. The feel of the keys. The sound filling the hall. The moment when she'd stopped being afraid and just let herself play. After the concert ended, people kept finding her. Strangers who wanted to shake her hand or tell her how the music had moved them. Mrs. Rodriguez hugged her tight and whispered, "You've been hiding this from us for 2 years." "I wasn't hiding it," Lisa said. "I'd just forgotten it was still there." A local newspaper reporter asked for an interview. Someone filmed part of the performance on their phone and wanted to post it online. A woman who ran a piano store offered to donate an instrument to her. The retired music teachers introduced themselves and said they'd love to give her free lessons if she ever wanted to get back into playing. Seriously, it was overwhelming. And wonderful and terrifying all at once. By the time Lisa and Sophie made it home that night, it was nearly midnight. They kicked off their shoes and collapsed onto the worn couch in their small living room. Sophie rested her head on her mother's shoulder. "So what happens now?" Sophie asked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Mom, you can't just go back to cleaning toilets after that. You're too good." Everyone saw it. Lisa stroked her daughter's hair. "Cleaning toilets pays our rent. It puts food on the table. It's going to help pay for your college. You were so happy up there. I've never seen you look like that. Like you were exactly where you were supposed to be." "I was happy," Lisa admitted. "But happiness doesn't pay bills, sweetheart." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Sophie said, "What if you could do both? What if you could teach piano or something? Play at events sometimes. I don't have the credentials for that. I never finished my degree." "So, you have the talent. That's what matters." Lisa smiled, even though Sophie couldn't see it. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best." The next morning, Lisa woke up to 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. The video of her performance had been posted online overnight. By breakfast time, it had been viewed over 50,000 times. By lunch, the number had climbed to 200,000. Her phone kept buzzing with messages from people she hadn't heard from in years. An old classmate from music school, her former piano teacher who'd retired to Florida, even the director of the conservatory she'd been accepted to 15 years ago. Mr. Patterson called around noon. "Lisa, I hope you don't mind, but I've been fielding calls all morning. The community center wants to know if you'd be willing to teach piano lessons twice a week. They can't pay much, but it's something. And we'd like to hire you to perform at our holiday concert in December. Actually pay you this time as a featured artist, not just a last-minute replacement." Lisa sat down at her kitchen table, her heart racing. "Mr. Patterson, I appreciate all of this, but I'm not a professional. Last night was extraordinary. And yes, maybe you're rusty in some technical ways, but you have something most professionals spend their whole lives trying to find. You have soul. You make people feel something." After she hung up, Lisa sat staring at her phone for a long time. The video had over 500,000 views now. People were leaving comments from all over the world, stories about their own deferred dreams, messages about how her performance had made them cry, or inspired them to pick up instruments they'd abandoned. One comment stood out. "I gave up violin 20 years ago to become an accountant. I thought that part of my life was over. Watching this made me realize it's never too late. I'm calling my old teacher tomorrow." Lisa felt something shift inside her chest. What she'd done last night wasn't just about her. It had touched something in other people too. Reminded them that the parts of ourselves we put away don't really die. They just wait. 3 months later, Lisa stood in her apartment looking at the upright piano that now sat against the wall where the TV used to be. The piano store owner had been true to her word, donating a beautiful, restored instrument. It wasn't a Steinway, but it was more than Lisa had ever dreamed of having again. She was still cleaning the concert hall 3 days a week. But now she also taught piano lessons at the community center on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. 15 students so far, mostly kids from families like hers who couldn't afford expensive private lessons. She charged whatever people could pay. Sometimes that was $20. Sometimes it was nothing. And she was practicing again. Every morning before work, she'd sit at the piano for an hour, working through pieces she'd loved years ago and discovering new ones. Her hands were getting stronger. The calluses from cleaning were still there, and now they shared space with new calluses from piano strings. The holiday concert was next week. Mr. Patterson had asked her to play to pieces this time. She'd said yes without hesitation. Sophie walked into the living room and found her mother sitting at the piano, just resting her hands on the keys. "You okay, Mom?" Lisa smiled. "Yeah, I was just thinking." "About what?" "About how I spent 15 years believing I had to choose between being a mother and being a musician. Like I could only be one thing." She looked up at her daughter. "But that night on stage, I realized something. I didn't stop being a pianist when I became your mom. I just put that part of myself away for a while. And maybe that was necessary. Maybe I needed those 15 years to become the person I am now." Sophie sat down on the bench next to her. "Play something for me?" Lisa's hands found the keys and she began to play. Not Chopin this time. Something simpler. A gentle melody that spoke of second chances and rediscovered dreams and the beautiful. Complicated truth that it's never too late to come home to yourself. As she played, she thought about that scared woman who'd walked onto the stage 3 months ago. The one who'd almost played the easy song. The one who'd almost let fear win. She was glad she'd been. Brave, she was glad she'd chosen to play her truth. Instead of playing it safe and sitting there in her small apartment with her daughter beside, her and music filling the air, Lisa Chen understood that sometimes the most important performances aren't the ones that bring standing ovations. They're the quiet moments when you decide to honor the person you truly are. Even when it's terrifying. Especially when it's terrifying. That's when the music matters most.